Welcome to First State Kopites, a podcast for Delaware's Liverpool supporters and their friends.
Hey, welcome to the latest edition of First State Kopites. It's episode 8 of our fourth season. I'm Paul, and today I'm joined by Haitham, who is in Chicago, and Sean, who's in a very dark part of Delaware on his iPhone. But if you're listening, you probably won't have any idea that's going on. We actually began last week by saying the 22-23 season had not started the way we'd hoped. Oh boy, it can always be worse, right? When you start to lose to Manchester United, that's never a good experience. So we're going to explore in the first part the United game and hopefully offer some hopeful signs for the upcoming matches. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that, but we're going to try. Then in part 2, we're going to look at we've got 2 games coming up. We'll probably record next episode after the Bournemouth game, but there's a game against Newcastle that's coming up pretty much after that. And then finally, in part 3, we'll talk about what else is going on. I definitely want to reference Michael Cox's piece in The Athletic today, where he talks about how leniency by referees is not necessarily a good thing and may well lead to a deterioration in the technical quality of football. I'm sure Graham Souness would not agree. Anyway, Sean, Haitham, let's get going with part 1. As we said, losing to the Manx, never a good experience. I've heard a lot of people complaining about a lot of things, and I'll start with you, Haitham. What was your overall take from the game? I mean, I think we can pick some bones out of the performance that weren't awful, but there was clearly something not right. And offered in the agenda a number of possible explanations. Was it down to individual errors? Because clearly a lot of people were blaming a lot of people about this. Was it down to the shape, which I think is not the shape we've played the last 4 or 5 seasons, or was it something about intensity, which again may have many causes? Where are you on the what was going on here and why didn't it work?
I just think it was a combination of things. I don't think it's one thing or another. It just felt, the intensity to me was the biggest thing. It just felt like they wanted it more for some reason. I know that's not, the reason, but that's how it felt to me. Like, they were more scruffy, than how we typically are. Um, um, I can't remember how many times, what's his name? Their new center back, Martinez,
Yeah.
was on the screen because of some tackle or some interception or um, you know, um, intercepting a shot or something like that. So just I saw that. I can't remember how many times I counted he did that, but that to me that was indicative of how intense or more intense than us they were.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, I feel like some of our players are tired. I mean, they've played so many matches. If you start counting, just this year, forget about last year.
Yeah.
So to me, just and then the injuries too, and I know everyone knows about that, but when you combine all these things together, I think it gets you to a place similar or the same place that we are in at this point. Um, I did not really look at the formation, but obviously it seemed odd. Um, I just I was trying to remember how many times before then that Milner was not effective. It just felt like he was out of place. I know he's a great player. I know he's older now, but he could still play. I mean, I watched him even the last couple of matches. He was better, but it just felt like the way he was positioned, it felt like he was out of place. Um, um, so yeah, it's to me, it's just a combination of things that resulted in all the negative performances, especially this last one.
Yeah. So I do think. So I think Martinez, if he stays at United, is going to be someone we'll absolutely adore to hate for quite a long time. Because he's quite a shithouse, isn't he? I mean, the shenanigans with the dive at the end of the game.
Yeah.
I think someone in the bar said, "If I was knifed, I would not be going down like that."
Yeah.
Which sounded really funny at the time.
I think if Nunez was playing, he would have eaten him alive, just height wise. And he would have pushed him around,
Right.
just the same way Brentford did him.
Yeah,
because they targeted him.
Yeah.
But there was no person to target him per se, so he kind of like fluffed his feathers or whatever. But yeah,
Well, the good news is when Nunez does play against him, the headbutt's not going to land on his head, right?
It'll be a neck butt, right?
Something like that. Yeah, it'll just be yellow. So Sean, I know you've done some digging into some of the stats behind the game, but first, let's definitely cover those. But also, what was your take? I know you were in a conversation about like some of the people to blame, but my take on it is, and I've watched a little bit of it back, is it really just seemed like like these players looked like they weren't very comfortable with whatever this new system is, and that left loads of holes, which gave United too much hope, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of reasons why we haven't looked right, and kind of all came to a head in that game. It seems like we have. I can't tell you what they are, but it seems like we have made some tactical changes, but just like fundamentally, the way I see it anyways is, and again, it's not like a personal attack or criticism. It's more like, it's just the way I saw it. I mean, the issue with that first half was that they were just getting through our midfield way too easily.
Mhm.
There's way too much space. And the way that I saw it, and some of the stuff I've looked at afterwards, is that the players that normally play the left-sided center midfield role are Thiago, Nabi, and sometimes Curtis Jones.
Yep.
We've had Milner playing there because those players haven't been available, and it's not his fault. He's 36 years old, and it's not a role that's really suited to his style of play. But in my view, he was getting sucked up, and we see when Curtis plays that role, we see it sometimes too. He's getting sucked up way too far forward, and he's not kind of being positionally sound, kind of staying in that deeper left position a lot of the time. As a result of that, Henderson seemed to be sliding over to the left to cover space. And as a result of that, the middle of the park was wide open. And Bobby does what he does sometimes, and he was dropping very deep. So you talked about the space between Diaz and Salah. I mean, there you go. Like if you have that kind of stuff going on. And then in addition to that, it makes it very difficult for Diaz to link up with Robertson, and then the whole thing just kind of falls apart. And I think in addition to some of the newer tactical changes Klopp's making, there's that. I think they probably are both mentally and physically fatigued on top of that. So it just all, snowballs. And the way that we play, and we saw this the year we didn't have center backs. Our players rely on the system. They rely on the fact that they will know where a player is. They shouldn't really even have to look to see if they're there. The way the system's supposed to work is that they hit it to a spot. They know the player's there. And early in the match, you could see that happened a couple of times, and the player wasn't there. And I think that threw us all off early, and it just never got better until about 35 or 40 minutes. And I'd have to watch the match back to understand what we were doing differently at that point. Yeah. My guess is that Klopp was getting them to stay more in their positions that they're supposed to be in. So, I mean, that's kind of the way I saw the first half. Second half wasn't a lot better, but I did feel like we started better. I think we got, I think we looked a lot more like ourselves once Fabinho came on. Again, not to like pick apart players, but for me personally, I mean, I think that's the worst match I've ever seen Jordan Henderson play. Personally, he was just way off on the day, which to me made matters even worse.
So, Sean, I clearly think there were mistakes, but do you think a lot of that was around? So, a couple of things. So Neil Atkinson made the point that Keita until Sunday probably was in the lineup instead of Milner, which changes the dynamics to the point you made. You've got someone who's used to playing in that position, whereas Milner's kind of drafted in late on and feels like he's not doing. I mean, his positioning is not where Keita would have been, right? That's kind of one thing. And then so that's a problem for him. But then because we were not compact at all in the first like 20-30 minutes, which is generally what we're very good at, that gave him, I know we criticize, McTominay and Fred for being like bad, but often some of the badness comes from the fact that they're covering like, I don't know, like 2/3 of the field because of the gap between their front and their back. And I think do you think we had a bit of that going on as well?
I mean, I can't speak to that, but but yeah, if Nabi could have played that left center mid role, I think we would have looked a lot better.
Yeah.
Because that's the role he's used to playing, and his skill set fits what we expect from that role. It wouldn't have resolved all the issues, but it would have helped a whole lot. And might have helped prevent their first goal, honestly, because if we would have had somebody deeper, they probably couldn't have broken down the field as easily, which eventually led to the play that resulted in the goal. So it's just, it's a cascading kind of effect. And I again, like, I really think like Klopp's German system, if one part is missing, the rest of it really struggles to catch up. And in this case, we really had, and I know it sounds crazy to say that Bobby is not well suited to that central striker role, but I'm not an expert on this, but my sense is that whatever tactical change we've made is meant to suit Nunez and Jota, not Bobby. And he's a totally different type player. And so really we had two positions that weren't kind of well suited. And, again, in addition to that, I did, at the time I was thinking like, our players, they really just looked confused, just not really on it, and I was thinking, well, it's not really about the effort. But then you look at the stats after the match, and they ran a lot more than we did. I mean, so the effort clearly was part of it. Now, maybe that's because they were confused and they weren't sure what to do. But regardless, I do think kind of physical and mental fatigue is a factor. And I guess jumping ahead a little bit, but I think ultimately it makes me feel like we do need to bring in another central midfielder before the end of the window, not because it's an immediate fix, but because given the condensed schedule this year, I just don't see how we can get through the year as successful as we want to be with, the personnel we have, even if we get healthy, because we know it's unlikely that Thiago and Nabi and whoever else is going to stay healthy the whole year. And if this is what happens when we don't have somebody that can fill that role, that's a big problem. Yeah. And we didn't even mention, I think he had a pretty good game again. Harvey was in a terrible position because he's 19 years old, and he's having to respond to all this stuff kind of falling apart around him. And you just, that's not great either. That's not good for his development. It's not really fair to throw a 19-year-old into that kind of situation either. So, there's a lot to think about there, but, I think ultimately if we get healthy and we have the players that are suited to those roles, I think we'll be fine. But it's a matter of us getting healthy. And right now we just don't have the players available. So
let me go back to you, Haitham, with a kind of a build on some of that. Like Diaz and Salah were about as far away from optimal positions for two very dangerous strikers as they could be in many situations. Often, like Diaz ended up bringing the ball back before he could kind of move forward. And Salah, Salah, who I think would have had a very good time operating between the left back and the centre back, was like wide out on the wing. It's like it felt like we clearly had set up for Nunez to play, which of course makes everyone look bad now because Firmino isn't that kind of player, and he's now occupying this huge space in the middle of the field that I referred to before. On Sean's, we need a midfielder. I did hear Neil Atkinson of the Anfield Wrap suggest that actually we might be better off buying Ivan Toney, because then we would have someone that would fit into the system that we're trying to play, irrespective of who else fills the other positions. Because trying to play a system designed around Nunez without Nunez is not a great idea.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about that actually. That even though he wasn't playing, they still stuck with the plan. I totally get it. Bobby, again, like Sean was saying, he just he was coming back and left that gigantic hole up front. But yeah, I mean, the question that I have for you is with Keita, does anyone know what was going on with him? Because the reason, like they listed, all the injuries, and his reason for that day was unknown. So I wasn't sure like what's going on, and I hear rumors today. I think it was somewhere talking about who was it? Dortmund wanting him actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, going back to what Sean was saying about a midfielder and all of that stuff, getting a new midfielder, it's gonna take a while. And Sean, you said it's not gonna be like the fix, or right away fix or whatever. But I'd rather get someone in January actually if we were gonna get since we haven't gotten any new midfielder in the transfer window. I'd rather get him in January rather than now. But I don't know. To me, I feel like we get these injured guys back. Whether it's Thiago, hopefully Keita comes back or whatever. And I don't have a lot of hope with Ox if he comes back. But yeah, I think if we get at least those two back, things are gonna look better.
So a few things there. I mean, So I don't know how reliable any of those Keita rumors are. Maybe you can comment on that, Sean. But a couple of things forward done with this game. Virgil van Dijk got a lot of criticism for the way that the first goal was defended, and I guess I have an issue with that because he was doing exactly what he was doing all through 2019-20 or 2018-19 in terms of guarding a part of the goal so Alisson could only had a smaller segment of the goal to save. And I really don't think it was his fault that Alisson threw himself in one direction, falling for the Jadon Sancho feint. And I thought Van Dijk did what I think the problem was everyone else around him looked bad. So therefore he, by implication was guilty about being part of this thing. And what your thoughts about that are. But I did want to just cover that before we move on to just summarize maybe some good points from the game.
So I agree with you. I thought the criticism of Van Dijk was, I mean, I don't think he's looked great so far this year, but I think the criticism's way over the top from some places. I thought the penalty that was called against him was really weak. It was a dive in the first game. This match, that play, if you go back and watch it again, and it's crazy to watch these analysts that get paid money and they don't like pay attention to this stuff. If Milner doesn't slide, he's blocking the left side of the goal. Mm-hmm. Van Dijk's blocking the middle of the goal. Ali's got the rest of the goal on that side. So Ali dives that way. But what happens is Milner dives in, which is like, I'm not going to fault him for that. He's trying to save the goal, whatever. But as a result of that, Sancho. I mean, Sancho just makes a great play. Like he feints, he pulls the ball back. Now left side of goal is open. The problem with saying Van Dijk should charge out at him is that if he does that, and you go back and watch the play, you'll see this. All Sancho has to do is tap the ball over to Bruno, and he's got a wide open net because Ali's on the ground on the other side. So I don't know if Van Dijk's factoring all that in, but I wouldn't put it past him. And I'm not sure that charging out makes that much of a difference. You know what I mean? Like it could have hit his arm. He could have gotten called for a penalty. He could have tapped it to Bruno, and I think he was okay on that play personally. I mean, I know a lot of people disagree. I think people are
wrong,
kind of grasping
obviously.
for
So I think we're saying they're wrong. This is good. Just a point of order here. I'm not in favor of calling that cheating, diving bastard Bruno. That flop was absolutely outrageous. That
should have been vilified off in the second half with that ball thing.
I mean, I didn't listen to anything after the game, but did anyone comment on that? Because if that had been Salah, we know what the narrative would have been, right?
It was absurd. I saw a few people comment, at least on Twitter. I don't know about the analysts on TV, but I mean, that was completely absurd. And you could tell Oliver went over and talked to him. The only reason he didn't card him is because he knew he would send him off, which is not the way it's supposed to work. Like, that was a yellow card offense. He should have been yellow carded for that. He should have been sent off.
So did he get yellow carded for the dive?
He got yellow carded for something. Might have been the dive, but he did not.
It was the dive,
yeah.
It was the dive.
And then was just behaving like the dick he is, really, for the retrieving the ball.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the Van Dijk incident and all the hoopla about it. I feel like, had Milner not had, that little back and forth with Van Dijk, no one would have paid attention to anything. And it's just because, they saw Milner and, going at him. They were like, oh, look at him. Even his, his captain or his teammate is telling him he's done something wrong. I mean, you see that type of play, type of goal or whatever all over the place. And it's just like, it's very, it's like right in front of the 6 yards line or something. So it's just like, and it happens like, very quickly, but, in a fast pace. You just have to like make up your mind what you want to do and not really actually think about, okay, what's the best thing to do over here? There's just no time to think. And I don't blame him for the goal by any means.
And it was a very good finish by Sancho, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And he nailed it. I mean, give the guy credit. Like, he's a good player. He made a good play. Like,
to your point, though, that showed how out of sync we were, right? Because if that had been best Fabinho, he's not falling over. He's like giving him no space. Van Dijk's covering, as you say, a part of the goal, and then Alisson doesn't have to make the dive.
Well, if it had been for, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. If it had been Fabinho, he probably would have recovered and been in that spot to begin with, and Sancho was wide open.
Yeah. Why didn't he start, by the way? Does anyone know? Is it?
No,
is it
wasn't clear. But I think he had decided Fabinho did not play at Old Trafford last year. I think
he was injured at the time, right?
I think Klopp said after the match, somebody asked him, and he said, "No, I'm the manager. I make the selections or something." So I think it was a manager's. That's what Klopp chose to go with. I'm assuming because he wanted to play the captain at Old Trafford, and again, we don't have, like, who else is going to play left center mid?
Yeah.
So you got to pick between Fabinho or Henderson, and he picked Henderson. Now it's like hindsight 2020. Like, Henderson was great last year at Old Trafford, and wasn't great this year. But it's again, to me, a lot of this goes back to, it's early in the season. We have tons of injuries. We're trying to make system changes, and it's just not working.
Okay. Just before we close out the first part, then, any good points to take away from the game? I'll start with you, Haitham. I actually thought it was interesting that the XG was quite close, given we sort of gave them a couple of obviously really high XG chances in that first half. Kind of said that we definitely weren't at our best, but we as Klopp said, we could have won that game, right? If the Rashford goal, if we were in 2021, apparently the Rashford goal would have been ruled out for offside.
Yeah. Thicker
Yeah.
VAR lines.
Yeah.
This time.
Yeah.
So I guess a good point for me is a little bit convoluted. So going back a couple of years ago when we had all those injuries, they came or they started in December, if I remember correctly, November, December, and things just went downhill.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad it's happening. And I understand, we might have more injuries, down the line. But I'm kind of happy that it's happening now. Not that, not happy. It feels better that it's happening right now versus like in November or December or, right after the World Cup.
Yeah.
Just to get it out of the way. And then just ironing out, the system changes, all of that stuff. And again, like Sean was saying, it's early in the season, So yeah, I that's to me, that's just the silver lining in everything that's happening nowadays.
Although as Daz in messaging did comment, one of the things that makes it seem so extreme is that that we've twice scored more points than most teams have scored to win the league and not won it. So the margin for error you feel is much smaller than it ever was. So dropping what is it now? Oh my goodness, 7 points in the first 3 games means you're putting enormous pressure on what you need to do for the rest of the season if you've got ambitions to win the title. So anyway, good points, Sean.
I thought Harvey looked good again. I thought Carvalho looked good again. I thought Gomez looked really good. I thought Gomez actually looked great. He's safe on a number of occasions. And he had a ton of space to cover because the midfield was wide open for a while. Actually, you'd say like Salah didn't have his best game. He wasn't really getting the ball, but he still created more chances than anybody else in the game.
Yeah.
And apparently, I got to confirm the stat, but I saw a stat that said that he's created more chances than anyone else in the league so far this year with 13, and he had 4 in the game. So, those are all positives.
Yeah.
I think Diaz is getting there. I think he's still figuring out how to play that role, figuring out how to link up with Robbo. Again, Thiago not being there is probably not great for that development on that left side. But yeah, I think we'll get there. Like I said, I think when Nunez gets back, he's going to score a lot of goals. But I guess my concern. I do have concerns about our midfield depth long term this year, given the condensed schedule of games, because we're going to start playing 2 games a week soon.
Yeah, this was the good point part, Sean. Just saying.
What's that?
Yeah, these are the good points.
So those are the good points. Like for me, Harvey, Salah, Gomez, and even Fabinho, I thought when he came on looked pretty good. Yeah. So it was probably the best game he's played this year.
So there was one moment at the beginning of the second half, right before the start, when there was a shot of Robertson and Diaz having a conversation. It was a deep conversation, and I'm like, "There's no way he's learned that much English in just 6 months." I mean, and Robertson was speaking, and Diaz was just shaking his head, and going back and forth. I'm like, "There's no ways, this can't be happening."
Yeah,
I do. Yeah, I do think. Well, we'll see when Nunez returns, but I do think there's something to be figured out there, because Diaz did look last week way more dangerous without when Nunez left the field, and he. I mean, there were times I thought even on Monday night where he looked quite sharp, quite dangerous. It would have been more dangerous if he'd started a lot of those runs, like not on the left wing touchline. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's wrap it up there, and then we're going to go to part 2, and in part 2 we will look at the week ahead. Hey, welcome back to part two of First State Kopites. We're going to look ahead, probably mainly this weekend, but also, Liverpool play Bournemouth this weekend. I think that's August 27th. And then on Wednesday, we play the Oil State, or the other Oil State team who plays in black and white on Wednesday. Two home games sounds good in theory, but clearly this season has not exactly gone forward the way we'd wanted. I'm I probably should have checked this, but I'm not clear about how many players are coming back. Whether we're basically picking from the same pool, which meant that we had a bench that it had 9 players, but like 3 of them with a lot of Premier or any serious Premier League experience. What are your hopes and expectations? This time I'll start with you, Sean, for Saturday, first of all. Bournemouth didn't look great against Arsenal. They looked okay against Villa. Villa have looked terrible against everybody else. So what do you hope for?
I mean, I would hope we could get 3 points against Bournemouth. I think they're generally projected to finish last in the league this year by most people.
Yeah.
Right now, if we drop points to Bournemouth, we got a whole another level of crisis going on. Yeah, hopefully we can get that. But the Newcastle match is an interesting one because it's just a few days later. We're getting back to the two games per week thing, and they look pretty solid. I don't want to say they look like they're not going to challenge for top 4, I don't think, but they look very solid. They're really a good squad. I don't like the whole story behind them in terms of the ownership and stuff like that personally, but I think they are going about building the squad in a good way, and I think they have some players that seem to be playing really good. But the Bruno and their team, Bruno Grimarsh, I think is.
I'll allow Brunez in this case.
Has been outstanding so far this year. I mean, and so he was a great pickup for them. I think they upgraded in goal and they upgraded center back. So I mean, they're just a much more solid team. So that's going to be a challenge. But I trust Klopp to try to figure some of this stuff out. Whether it's maybe we just simplify the system in the short term until we get healthier. I don't expect this to continue. I mean, he's just too good of a manager for him to not figure something out.
Yeah,
but it might require, if not a change in system, like a tactical change. It kind of like we did that in 2021 season when we didn't have the center backs and we ended up going on a run and made Champions League. So it's not like he hasn't done that before out of necessity. I'm still relatively optimistic. I'm still like somewhat optimistic on the season. A lot of people are like super doom and gloom, and I understand why, but you gotta, like I was saying before we recorded, like we're only 5 points behind City and it's 3 games into the season. It's been a horrible start, like worst case scenario almost, but it's still only 3 games in the season. We're still only 5 points behind City is the way I look at it. I'm not counting on Arsenal to challenge for the title this year either. I'm just be honest about that. But I'm relatively optimistic we can win both of the next 2 matches. I'd be where Daz is right now in terms of being upset and down if we lose to Bournemouth. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, if you listen to us regularly, you will know that we've confidently predicted we're going to thump Fulham because they're useless, and United are useless, and we're going to batter them too. So, saying that.
So I'll caveat that, Paul. This is excuses. We haven't looked good, whatever. We've been unlucky in all 3 games for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And honestly, Fulham and Palace have both looked good. I mean, I didn't expect Fulham to be as good, but they've looked pretty good so far. And United didn't start Harry Maguire or Ronaldo, which we know proves them right off the top. So that's a better version of the United team than anybody else faced. So
I do think we'd have won if they'd have brought on Ronaldo at 75.
yeah.
Because they've only had 10 players on the field. But
Harry Maguire was the big one.
We missed him badly. We did. There was that meme, I don't know if you saw it, we're going to be fine. We've got Salah, Diaz, and Maguire. We're bound to win. Yeah. Well, sadly, we didn't have Maguire. I do think because we're not playing very well, I think the Bournemouth game could go one or two ways, which is it's going to be another struggle, or it's going to be one of those where they score early and just don't give up because they're so frustrated about what's happened so far. So I guess my prediction is it's going to be ugly or it's going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be anywhere in between. And so I'll go to you, Haitham, your perspective. And one of the things I'd like to weave into this is Klopp's demeanor has been interesting. I think last couple of weeks, really felt to me like he looked a bit exhausted of the midfield chat. He wasn't happy about some things that happened at the weekend. I know he said, we probably could have won, but so what are you hoping for the weekend? And at least one of the things I'm hoping for is that Jurgen feels better about everything.
Yeah. So I basically I don't have any expectations. I don't think either game is going to be easy. Just because of the state of where we are at this point when it comes to performances. So I just, I don't want to say it's going to be, difficult or easy or, anything like that. I'm just going to watch it. It's just, it's going to be a process, and, I understand nothing is going to change overnight. And even when we start having these players back from injury, we've seen it over the years. It takes a while.
Yeah.
By a while, I mean, a game or two, whatever, before an injured player just coming back is actually, up to 100% or even 90%.
Yeah.
From the perspective of club, I sense, what you were talking about in some of his interviews, some of his press conferences. My interpretation of just my what I think is happening with him is just amused at the number of injuries. Because I can't remember which press conference. I think it was the one before this United match, when someone asked him about the injuries, and he was like, yeah, I just at one point I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, why are we having that many injuries? So he just told me that he's questioning the injuries, not anything that the club did or he did or whatever. And he started explaining, like, I think three of them actually came injured from
the summer.
The summer, yeah, vacation, international duty, all of that stuff. So yeah, I just, I think there's just so much going on, and I feel like he keeps trying to explain the same thing over and over and over. We don't want to just buy a midfielder just to say, our midfielder is we want to buy the right person. And I've heard them, I don't know how many times say that. So yeah, it can get frustrating, when you have to explain yourself over and over.
Yeah. Well, I hope he's not getting kind of overly frustrated. I've certainly had enough, and you've probably heard the same comments about this is looking a bit like his Dortmund season. Well, I listened to someone today, and they were saying, well, actually, it doesn't, because the first three games in that Dortmund season, where everything kind of went to pieces, he won the first two out the first three. So
yeah.
We're not even in that good a position. So anyway, well, let's not dwell on that right now. Just final thought then on the next two games. If we don't win both of these games, are you now thinking it's top four at best and hoping for a good Champions League run, or is there still time to pick it up?
Top four in the triple.
Yeah. Well, when
Didn't it
the
happen in like 2002?
2001, well,
2001.
not quite, but they did win. They got top four, and maybe top three, I think it was back then. Anyway, they got into the Champions League. They won the equivalent of the Europa League, I guess the UEFA Cup back then, FA Cup and League Cup in the
Yeah.
same year. Yeah,
That's a fantastic season.
yeah. It is. It is.
And
Never
I
seen a great
remember,
season.
I think they started kind of slow too. Like they lost the first couple of matches or whatever
Yeah,
back then. So
yeah.
look at history, people.
Didn't the Man United fans call that the Mickey Mouse treble?
They did.
Something like
Yeah.
that. It's like, in hindsight, you're like, hey, it's still 3 trophies in a year. Like, whatever.
Well,
I'll take that most seasons.
That was because the 2 years before they had won the league, the FA Cup, and the European Cup, Champions League, which right now they're not going to do anything like that ever again. But okay, let's move on. Yeah. So anyway, so that's part two. Any kind of, I mean, what's your feeling? Because I kind of offered mine, which is it's either going to be awful or easy. Against Bournemouth, against Newcastle, it's going to be a tough match. Although Newcastle were really lucky not to concede a bunch of goals against Brighton, and Brighton notoriously doesn't score enough goals compared to their expected goals. What's your hope and expectation about scores? Sean, start with you.
Scores. I'm gonna be bold here and go with 3-0 against Bournemouth, and then Newcastle. I'm gonna be hopeful and say we win it 2-1 late in the match.
Okay. Ooh, so a nervous Wednesday for us all. What about you, Haitham?
I'm not having an expectation. I've jinxed myself so many times this year, so I just I'm not hearing about.
So we're gonna lose on Saturday, and we're gonna really lose badly on Wednesday.
Probably that's that's a possibility.
Okay. Well, on that optimistic note, we're going to end part two, and we're going to come back and just wrap it up with maybe look around the league and see what else we can chat about. Hopefully, take comfort in someone else's misery. Hey, welcome back to part three of First State Kopites. We're going to wrap up a few different things here, going in a few different directions. I do want to talk about the letting the game flow. I know we had a bit of a fume last week about some of the decisions in the game we had against Palace. A few really mad things happening this weekend in terms of what tackles are now allowed and what tackles don't get allowed and don't even get yellow cards. So let's start with that. Do want to celebrate Chelsea losing and Thomas Tuchel looking like he lost it in the process, and City dropping points, and then we're going to show a small window to talk about the transfer window, because that feels like the kind of thing that we wouldn't tweet about unless, of course, it's from the right sources. So I'll start with you, Haitham. I don't know if you've noticed much difference in the refereeing this season, but I feel like I've seen enough challenges that are robust and allowed, and enough stupid comments from people like Graham Souness saying we've got football back to the dark ages, I guess, of the 80s where 2-footer tackles were allowed. I mean, have you noticed this? I should tell you, by the way, the data is not clear that less fouls are being given. What it does say is that the Premier League is probably the most liberal in terms of its interpretation of fouls across the big 5 leagues in terms of fouls per game.
Yeah, I've noticed it. I think it's still all over the place, and depending on the referee. Some referees, they let it go. Others, it's a stupid. I don't know, not even a foul or whatever, and they, it's called a foul. So it's frustrating, and it's not. I've watched a few matches, obviously, different teams and all of that stuff, and there's no consistency. So that's my only thing against it. If you want to be lenient, just be lenient across the board. It's not good when it's not consistent.
Yeah. I mean, I do think.
Yeah.
I do think there's definitely something about like once you decide to be lenient, you can't continue to give soft people falling over in the penalty area
Yeah.
penalties, which I think we've seen. I'm not even commenting on Mitrovic. I mean, I think the Chilwell penalty against Everton was a ridiculous example of an English international getting away with something that nobody who doesn't look like them would have got.
Well, even the offside on the weekend, there was a play that we had after the Rashford goal that looked closer than Rashford was, and they didn't give us the benefit of the doubt on the double line or whatever it is.
Right.
The one that I think Harvey, I can't remember the result of the play, but Harvey crossed the ball in, and they flagged him offside, and it was like, he if he was offside at all, it was by a hair, and they didn't give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
So, it's the consistency and the subjectivity of it. It's just nonsense, and it seems to just keep getting worse. It's like whatever they try to do, it's.
Yeah. So I do think and it's a couple of things. The more that you try to like claim that we're going to be more lenient, and then you continue, you find ways to give certain players, certain situations, soft fouls that it looks more egregious. It actually felt maybe, this sounds sad to say it, but maybe last year was kind of a golden age where they weren't giving so many soft fouls for Kane and Sterling diving in the box. I think numerically statistically that's true. Whereas we seem to be back this season to like the standard for a foul is like gone up in some situations, but they're still giving soft penalties. And the VAR offside calls this weekend wasn't just our game. I mean, they all looked. There were several of them looked like that looks off, and they gave it on. And it's like that looks on, and they gave it off, and it felt like it depended on the referee, which may, of course, have depended on the team.
And I have an even worse take than that, Paul. I think in 1920, when they started using it, they actually called things most accurately.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of calls, and there go VAR pool and all this stuff. And and since then they've been screwing around with the rules.
Yeah.
And it's like I think they just about had it right in 1920. I mean, I'm not even saying that because I'm a Liverpool fan, but I think the system worked better than it has any of the other years since then. And I don't know what they're doing. I mean, part of me thinks that the PGMOL, like, they just don't want the system to work.
Yeah.
And like they're coming up with excuses all the time to give themselves their own, subjective authority. It's just ridiculous.
I'll give you the final word on refereeing, Haitham, but one thing I do want to highlight is in last week's episode, I did point out that Paul Tompkins had a theory that the further away from Liverpool you were born as a referee, and the younger you were, the more likely it was that you would give kind of unbiased decisions, statistically based. And this weekend, one of the better refereeing performances was by an Australian, Jason Gillett, in the Newcastle Man City game. And even his call, but what was interesting was where he red carded Trippier, and then VAR intervenes and says, "Go look at that." And it's like, is VAR doing that with the English referees? I don't know that they are, but that seemed to me to be like, yes, that's how you want to use it, right? And we could debate whether the Trippier thing should have been a red card. Probably not quite, but it was it was pretty cynical.
Yeah, I don't think it was a red card at all. He was, I don't know. I mean, this was one instance where slowing it down actually showed the help him versus in most cases when you slow down a tackle or whatever, and it looks way worse than how it happened in real time. But yeah, it's I don't know. Even going a week back, Mike Dean, which I was actually surprised that he was. I thought he retired, but I guess he's still
He's just
does
doing VAR now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The Chelsea Tottenham match, where he was like, well, I looked at it and didn't think it was, what was it? What's
Violent
the term?
conduct.
Yeah, violent. Thank you,
Yeah.
violent conduct or whatever. I mean, if someone pulls someone's hair, I have no idea how you can see that as violent conduct. But yeah, it's again just all over the place. And you know, I hear these referees, whether it's when they are on VAR duties or on the pitch or whatever, come back and say, "Oh yeah, we made a mistake," but they continue to make that mistakes. If it's not them, it's someone else.
Yeah.
So it's either PGMOL just has the worst, learning modules in the world that their referees are not that consistent.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, or it's I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it just feels too much. Like this is your job. This is the only thing you do.
So I think one of the issues is bias is not necessarily a conscious thing, right? And I think what we're probably observing in most cases in some of these things is some unconscious bias, whether it's against someone's race or whether it's against somewhere this team comes from.
Yeah, 100% on that, Paul. I think the vast majority of it's unconscious bias, but they are clearly biased, and when they get the calls clearly wrong, they ought to be able to correct that over time.
Yeah. So the disappointing thing for me about our final word on referees is that Michael Oliver has regressed to the pack, because the last two games he's refereed for us, I think it was the Spurs home game. He let Spurs get away with an awful lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I was there, and it was really visible and surprising, and it felt like the same had happened on Monday. Not saying this would have changed the result, but just the aggressiveness of Martinez, Dallo, and etc.
He was pretty terrible on Monday. I mean, it was kind of shocking how bad he was in some cases.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, that's the other thing is that we've gotten some horrible calls against us in the first three games.
Yeah.
And we definitely could have won all three, as bad as we were. I'm not saying we were good, but we definitely could have won all three of those games.
Which A, would have changed the narrative, and B, maybe would have changed actually the way that the optics on the games, right? Because I think there were parts of that Palace game where it's like, wow, this is what we do at home. We make it really difficult for people. Okay, final topic. You can choose your own. Feel free to talk about Thomas Tuchel. Like, why was he on the bench anyway after getting a red card? That's a possible topic, but I thought the defeat to Leeds showed some interesting vulnerabilities. City did drop points. Feels slightly less good to me that they drop points to a fellow oil state sponsor. Or Sean, you can even talk about the transfer window. I'll start with Haitham. What reflections on the weekend? What really grabbed your attention?
I don't know what's going on with Chelsea. It's a mystery to me. I mean, I understand they don't have a proper number 9, but they had one, and they gave him away. And they're talking nowadays about getting Aubameyang, and who was the other one? There was another player that they wanted to get, but it's like, okay, who is it?
The diving Englishman, Anthony Gordon.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm talking just from a number 9 perspective. It's just like, okay, so clearly you had a really, really good number 9, and he could not play within your system. So how do you see bringing another number 9 as the fix for your goal scoring issues at this point?
Yeah.
So that's just I feel like Tuchel is just I don't want to he's definitely, I don't know if he's on the hot seat or not, but he's just at this point he's all over the place. He's trying to figure out stuff, and it's not happening. I think they're gonna get better during the season. But it's interesting to me with they don't have a lot of injuries like we do, and they still just look like crap.
But they have two key injuries. Kovacic and Conte, I think, are both injured, right?
Yeah.
That's huge for them. I think
yeah. That's true.
So it's a pity our chat is not broadcast to more people, but I did point out in that Spurs Chelsea game that
Yeah.
Conte, the way Conte pulled up with the hamstring looked like no one was anywhere near him. Looked really serious. That could have well have been the most important thing that happened in that game. I think even though he's 30, he clearly makes them a much better team. And I think now that you've got Todd Bowley operating a bit more like the Glazers than FSG, hopefully they'll sign a whole load of people that don't fit their system. I know you'd love to talk about transfer window and Chelsea, so maybe you combine those, Sean. One thing I would say is, I thought Koulibaly, I thought was really interesting. Like for years, I always thought like, what an awesome defender. But one of the criticisms that I have heard about him in Italy is that he'll dive into challenges and people with pace can cause him problems. And it was like, ooh, this game felt like it was like a poster child for exactly that criticism of him.
Yeah, I mean, like the criticism I've heard of him is that he's not quick on the turn. Like he's kind of good in a sprint, but he's not quick on the turn. So if you're playing a high line with him, he can get beat. No, yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to say actually on the transfer window. I just think it's funny that Chelsea are going. They're rumored to be looking at a £60 million deal for Anthony Gordon. I don't really buy that, but it'd just be wacky. But there are.
Sorry, Sean, just interrupt. This may be one of those moves where you try to make your rivals weaker.
There are rumors that out there, I guess that RB Leipzig is interested in Naby, but if he's seriously injured now, I don't know that that's going to happen either. Yeah. The only thing
Fofana for Chelsea too.
I really like the looks of Caseta from Brighton. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
on my personal wish list.
So it's interesting, right, that they let go of 2 players in the summer, including Basuma, and they actually seem to look better. Kukurea is obviously the other one, right?
Their scouting department must be amazing because they constantly keep finding guys like this.
Yeah.
I have one more thought before we end it. I'm just hoping that Gerard does not get the sack because they've been so awful.
Yeah.
But Brendan Rodgers is the odds-on favorite now, I think.
Well, I do think there are 4 or 5 people that are I don't know if the right words, at risk. And Villa have not looked good in any of the games that I've seen them. I mean, they even didn't look great. They beat Everton, right? They didn't look great against Everton.
It seems like that whole Tyrone Mings drama really didn't work out so far.
Well, I think his issue is that he doesn't want Mings. I think we've talked about Mings is not like top defender. The guy they signed, was it Carlos?
Diego Carlos.
Has he got an ACL injury? He's got serious.
Yeah.
That's that's going to be really hard, right? You're going to build your team around like your brand new defender, and now he's not there. You got to go back to the old guy that you've already dissed as not having the right attitude.
Yeah.
Ooh,
they played okay yesterday, beating what was it, the Bolton Wanderers. They still went down. They went down 1, but came back and beat them 3-1.
Oh, Villa.
Yeah, in the EFL.
Oh, okay. I haven't paid attention to any. I did see that this is going to get mixed reaction for people who follow our podcast. Did you see that Rangers made it into the Champions League?
Yeah.
Group stages.
They beat Eindhoven at Eindhoven 1-0.
I do hope they don't play at Anfield. Anyway, we can go into that on another podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're.
We had our draw, by the way. I just want to get this in. We drew Derby County, I think, in the League Cup.
Okay.
It's supposed to be the week of November. Week of November 7th. Apparently.
Is that a home or away game?
I don't remember that. I can't remember.
You said is it? You said November. Oh, is that September?
It's the week of November 7th.
November?
I think so. Maybe I read that wrong. I don't know.
Okay.
But because I think they got to get the games in different places, But Chelsea drew Man City, so that'd be interesting.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, what happened to Manchester City's drawer of fixtures?
Well,
They're not doing a good job anymore.
The League Cup again, final probably. We'll
Surely,
see.
no, surely they meant Burton Albion. That can't be true. It's got to be. Okay. On that note, November 7th. That's just weird. Anyway, we'll get our fact checker on that before the episode gets published. Haitham, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure. Sean, thanks for making the time to do this. And if you're listening, we'll be back. I think we'll be back after Liverpool play Bournemouth, hopefully with a good news story. I say thanks, Sean. Thanks, Haitham. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with a friend. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with a friend. Follow us at First State Kopites on Twitter. We only tweet and retweet from sources we think are credible. Finally, music is courtesy of Hypnotic. They're a Welsh electro-pop band, and you can find them at https://hyperfollow.com/hypnotic. Hypnotic is HYPENOTIC. Thanks so much to them.